It started with a sound they couldn't place. During a quiet renovation of an old countryside church in Vermont, a crew working behind the altar heard a hollow echo when they removed a section of warped paneling. Curious, they broke through the plaster, and behind it, embedded deep in the wall, was a sealed wooden box. No dust, no rot, as if it had been hidden with care. Inside was a small diary bound in cracked leather, locked with a rusted clasp. Etched into the cover were 2 letters, E.B. When they pried it open, the pages inside revealed the voice of a girl, fragments of thoughts, half-finished prayers, and nervous observations. She wrote about staying late after choir, about someone watching her from the west hallway, about a door only he could open. The last entry was the shortest. He said no one would believe me if I told, but tonight There were no more pages. No full name. No confirmed identity. No ending. But someone remembered a girl who used to sit in the very last pew. Alone. Silent. And then, one Sunday, she never returned. The initials inside the diary were E.B., but no full name was ever mentioned. When investigators combed through baptismal logs, Sunday school attendance sheets, and archived bulletins from the early 1960s, no one with those initials appeared. There was no record of a girl enrolled in the church school or choir under that name. No family by those initials was ever registered as parishioners. It was as if the girl had attended but never existed on paper. Most of the clergy from that era were long gone, and the few remaining parishioners, now elderly, struggled to remember details. But one woman, who had been 12 years old in 1963, recalled someone. A girl who came to Mass alone, always sitting, quietly in the back pew near the side aisle. She didn't talk much and never took communion. Her clothes were plain, sometimes wrinkled, and she never wore a coat, even in winter. She was small for her age, maybe 9 or 10, and her hair was always tied in a loose braid that looked like it hadn't been brushed. The woman didn't know her name, but remembered that the girl never spoke to anyone unless spoken to first, and even then she answered with just a nod or a single word. The last time she was seen was during Lent of 1964. After that, the girl simply stopped appearing. No one asked why. No search was launched. The community just moved forward. When the memory surfaced again decades later, after the diary was found, it wasn't with clarity, but with unease. The image of a quiet girl in a silent pew, never called by name, never claimed by anyone, was now tied to a voice preserved in fading pencil, buried in a wall no one was supposed to open. The diary was smaller than expected, no larger than a paperback novel, with a leather cover that had darkened over time and a delicate brass clasp nearly fused shut by rust. Its pages were uneven, hand-cut and sewn into the spine by thread, suggesting it had been handmade, possibly by the girl herself or someone close to her. The initials E.B. were burned into the cover, imprecise but deliberate. When opened, the diary revealed roughly 24 surviving entries, though many of the pages were warped, stained, or stuck together. The writing style varied. Some entries were neatly penned in careful cursive, others scrawled hastily, slanting downward as if written in fear or under pressure. The early entries were quiet and observational. She wrote about choir practice, about the echo of footsteps in the church hall after hours, about watching dust float in the sunlight that poured through the stained glass windows. But quickly, a second presence emerged, referred to only as he. The tone shifted from peaceful to cautious. She wrote that he stood in the west hallway watching her, that he said she was special, that she was chosen for something not fully explained. She began to mention a small room in the church basement, one with no windows and a locked door only he had the key to. In one entry, she described being taken there after evening prayer and told not to speak of it. He says no one would believe me, she wrote. In others, she mentioned dreams she couldn't wake from, of knocking she heard from inside the walls, and of being told her voice had to be hidden, like the rest of them. The handwriting toward the end grew erratic. Ink blotted, sentences unfinished, as if she'd started writing and stopped suddenly. The final entry was just one sentence, cut off midway. He said, "No one would believe me if I told. But tonight, There was no continuation. The rest of the page was blank. No date, no signature, no explanation. What was most disturbing wasn't just what was written. It was the overwhelming sense that the diary hadn't been lost. It had been hidden, locked, sealed, and someone had made sure it stayed that way. The diary mentioned a staircase hidden behind the blue curtain near the organ loft. Most believed it was a child's imagination, but out of curiosity, the renovation crew decided to investigate. Behind the organ was a faded section of paneling that didn't match the rest of the wall. Behind it, they found what appeared to be a sealed archway. The air behind it was colder, mustier, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Once opened, it revealed a narrow wooden staircase descending into darkness. It wasn't marked on any architectural plans, and long-term staff said they had never known it existed. The steps creaked under pressure, but held. At the bottom was a small chamber, no more than 10 feet wide, with stone walls, no windows, and a low ceiling. The room smelled of damp wood and something older, harder to define. On one wall was a wooden chair, plain and slightly splintered. On the opposite side hung a cross, tilted slightly off-center with deep scratches beneath it on the stone. The floor was uneven, the dust thick, undisturbed for years. In one corner sat a rusted lantern and an empty tin plate. No personal items, no clothing, just remnants of occupation, too intentional to be coincidence. The atmosphere was unbearable, airless, muffled as though sound itself was reluctant to stay. Some described a sensation of being watched in the room. Others reported nothing at all. There were no signs of recent entry, no clues as to who might have used the space or for what. But when compared to the diary's description, the room with no windows, the one only he unlocks, there was no mistaking it. The location matched, the secrecy matched, and the silence inside matched something even worse. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt sealed, hidden with purpose. Like it had done exactly what it was built to do, keep something inside until someone forgot it was ever there. The diary never revealed his name. He was simply he, or the man in the west hallway. But his presence was constant, looming in nearly every entry after the first few pages. He wasn't described in detail, just glimpses. The way his shoes echoed on the stone floor, how he stood still for long periods at the end of the hall, sometimes without blinking, sometimes humming quietly to himself. She wrote that he always wore dark clothes and carried keys that jingled, like coins. He never raised his voice, never called her by name, only watched. For months after the diary was found, efforts were made to identify this man. Church employment records from the early 1960s were incomplete, but a few old ledgers revealed the name Bernard Elie, a temporary custodian hired in late 1962 and dismissed abruptly in early 1964. No termination reason was listed. No incident reported. Just a single line in the payroll ledger marked "Position closed." No photograph existed in parish archives. He was not clergy, not a teacher, just a name. But several older members of the congregation remembered someone. Quiet, solitary, never spoke unless spoken to. They recalled he lived on the church grounds, in a small apartment above the maintenance wing that no longer exists. No one remembered him being friendly. No one remembered him being dangerous either, just unsettling. One woman recalled her mother warning her not to walk alone near the west hallway after dark, though she never explained why. When investigators attempted to trace Bernard Elie's Later life, they found a sparse trail. He had moved to Massachusetts, worked a series of odd jobs, never married, and died in 1982. There were no known relatives. No criminal record, nothing definitive. But the initials matched the diary cover, E.B. Whether they belonged to him, to the girl, or to both, it remained unclear. Some believe she carved her fear into those pages. Others think he left the diary behind on purpose, letting it tell just enough to be found, but never enough to be proven. The last page of the diary was unlike the rest. The writing stopped mid-sentence, the pencil line trailing slightly downward as if the hand holding it had been pulled away. There was no punctuation, no signature, just 7 words. He said, "No one would believe me if I told, but tonight he—" And then nothing. The remaining pages were blank. Not torn out, not erased, just never written on. For investigators, it was the most disturbing detail of all. The earlier entries had fear, yes, but also rhythm and routine. This final message felt like a break, a sudden stop, a door shutting that was never reopened. Analysts studied the paper, the pressure of the pencil, the ink residue on nearby pages, hoping for a clue. Some speculated she was interrupted while writing. Others believed she may have known it would be her final chance to say anything. There was no date on the last entry, no way to place when it was written or what happened that night. The diary gave no closure, only questions. Who was she really? Why was she never reported missing? Why did no one look? And what did she mean by the rest of them? There were moments in earlier entries where she hinted at other voices, other presences. She mentioned hearing crying, whispers, someone breathing on the other side of a wall. If these weren't imagined, who were they? The room beneath the altar gave no answers. The church sealed the stairwell again after the investigation ended, this time permanently. The diary was placed in an archive, sealed under protective glass, labeled with her initials, but still without a name. Visitors who read it never forget that last unfinished line. Because it doesn't feel fictional. It doesn't feel forgotten. It feels like someone started to speak and was never allowed to finish.